Now, for more on the troubles in the Chinese property sector, we are speaking now with Jackson Chan. He is Senior Manager at Global Fixed Income at iFAST Hong Kong. Jackson, good to have you with us. Now, following up on that report on the LA project, what would be the fate of Chinese property ventures in Asia Pacific? I mean, for instance, Cambodia's Sihanoukville, Malaysia's Forest City, and even some country garden projects, in Australia and New Zealand. I mean, they've all fallen on hard times, haven't they?
Yeah, you're right. As you just said, the Sihanoukville in Cambodia, it is a project decided to be a coastal city that consists of numerous luxury residential buildings and also casino resorts. And for example, the Forest City in Johor is also supposed to be a mega project under the Belt and Road Initiative that can be a home to 1 million people. But I think most of us already know right now, after the pandemic, the Chinese companies are no longer able to inject more money and continue to support the construction. So many people are now describing, for example, the Forest City as a ghost city. And unless the Malaysian government or any other property giants, they would like to take over the project. Otherwise, we think it is virtually impossible to see Country Garden, which was actually once the biggest developer in China, to restart the construction anytime soon.
Jackson, let's just circle back to those defaulted Chinese developers we were talking about. Do you think all that extra time is going to help Kaisa? Because from what we know, another Chinese developer, I believe it's Road King, it's also warning that it may default and it also needs more time to repay its debt. So doesn't that show that developers are still grappling with a liquidity crisis?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So according to our observation, we think that actually we saw quite a lot of different policy released and by the Chinese government recently tried to rescue the property market. Yeah, but we think that some of the fundamentals of the market, such as the confidence of the home buyers, remain very low. And we believe there is still a long way to go for the sector to turn around. And one key reason is that some banks, the Chinese banks, they always try to prioritize the SOE developers because those developers have lower risk. And it is still for those non-SOE developers, like you mentioned, the Road King and also the Kaiser, to obtain any significant help. So the strongest developers, such as the China Overseas and also the China Resources, they have unlimited funding facility. But on the other hand, according to our calculation, actually, the Chinese real estate offshore bond default rate has already exceeded 70%. And this group of developers, they receive no attention at all. So this kind of uneven distribution will continue to negatively impact the overall sentiment of the market.
Jackson, taking one step back, looking at the bigger picture, I mean, the property sector continues to be the biggest drag on the Chinese economy, no doubt, because it contributes a quarter of the total economy in China. But with this string of defaults and liquidation, could this in any way impact the financial sector more severely, do you think?
I think that currently it is already affecting the financial sector. And I think one key concern for us is not just about the defaulted loans or bonds. I think, on the other hand, it is about how the Beijing, their attitude towards the Chinese real estate sector. So right now, what we see is that the Beijing really have the determination to try to rescue the sector. So they introduce quite a lot of easing policies, such as the 17-point measures and also the project refinancing whitelist to encourage the banks to rescue the distressed developers by, for example, extending the loans and even borrowing more money to them to ensure the project construction. So last month, the government once again proposed a new set of heavyweight policy. So we call it the 517 new policy. So it is a series of supportive measures to lower the debt, for example, lowering the down payment to 15% only, and also providing another 300 billion support to the SOE to buy the unsold project lands and convert them into affordable housing. So this kind of measures will somehow actually aggravate the burden of those Chinese banks. And we are actually a little bit afraid that some of the Chinese banks, they will face some liquidity problem if the government try to put more pressure on them to lend more money to those developers.
Jackson, despite those measures that you've mentioned, China property prices, I mean, they did suffer their biggest fall in nearly a decade last month. Is this indicating that the market is still perhaps searching for a bottom?
Yes, you're right. I think according to the latest figures announced by the government, the average new home price across the major 70 cities has dropped by 4.3% year on year, so which is already the biggest decline since 2015. However, we still think this figure somehow beautify the situation. So because it is actually a lagging indicator to observe the overall picture of the Chinese real estate sector. So in fact, according to some third-party research platforms, the average decline in the house price in the first and second tier cities is around 15% over the last 2 years, which is much similar to our observation. So for the third and fourth tier cities, most of them are actually experiencing an average of 20% or even 30% drop from the peak. So yeah, if you imagine that the down payment right now in China is usually 30%, so which means the home buyers are losing almost their entire down payment within 2 years. So I think the situation right now is quite bad in the Chinese real estate sector, and I don't think within a short time span we will see a very significant recovery.
All right, great hearing your thoughts on China's property crisis. Thanks you so very much for your time. Jackson Chan there of iFAST Hong Kong. And of course, Roland will be back with us a little bit later for more business news. But coming up as well on East Asia tonight, the yen hovering near levels that last triggered intervention by authorities, despite more warnings by Japan's top currency diplomat. China and the